Like your voice was silenced, and your rightful place was taken? It's a story about reclaiming not just the house, but her own power. You are not coming, she said coldly. This trip is for real family. My father, Gerald, was often busy with his construction business, but when he joined us, those days felt magical. Mom was diagnosed with aggressive breast cancer, and within 8 months she was gone. She was tall, blonde, and had a smile that never quite reached her eyes. Your father and I have been seeing each other, she announced during our first dinner together. I pushed my food around my plate, unable to speak. Within weeks, Diane and her 2 children moved into our home. Vanessa was 12, quiet and watchful. Family movie nights would be planned when I was scheduled to work my part-time job at the local bookstore. We were just discussing grown-up matters, she would say with that plastic smile. When I tried to talk to him about feeling excluded, he would sigh heavily. Diane began referring to Tyler and Vanessa as the kids, while addressing me by name as if I existed in a different category. The lake house became my sanctuary during those difficult high school years. Dad retained usage rights until then, but the property was legally designated as mine. After graduating high school, I went to college as far away as I could reasonably afford. I limited my visits home to major holidays and the occasional weekend when I knew Diane would be away visiting her sister. My relationship with Dad became increasingly strained. When I graduated college, I surprised everyone, including myself, by revealing a talent for real estate investment. By 28, I had a modest but growing portfolio of rental properties and a comfortable condo in Chicago. I attended Tyler and Vanessa's college graduations, and even helped Vanessa find her first apartment when she moved to Minneapolis. I thought things were improving slowly but surely. I believed that as adults we could move past the tensions of our blended family beginnings. How wrong I was. Annual Matthews family reunion last weekend in July. Save the date. Family reunions have become a tradition over the last few years, usually held at a rented venue or park, and I valued these rare occasions when everyone made an effort to get along. Haley will probably want to have input on everything, Diane said, her voice carrying that familiar tone of annoyance. My ears perked up at this. They were talking about my lake house. Before I could hear Dad's response, I hung up, not wanting to eavesdrop further, but the seed had been planted in my mind. I heard you and Diane talking about the reunion, I admitted. I know it was an accidental call, but I wanted to offer the lake house as a venue. It would be perfect for everyone, and I would love to host. There was a pause on the other end of the line, then Dad's voice artificially bright. That would be wonderful, honey. Let me talk to Diane and get back to you. Oh, do not worry about all that, Diane said quickly. This struck me as odd, but I agreed, not wanting to start any conflict. In the weeks that followed, I noticed I was increasingly excluded from the planning process. My texts about preparations went unanswered for days. When I called Dad to discuss sleeping arrangements, he seemed uncomfortable and quickly passed the phone to Diane, who assured me everything was under control. Then I began noticing social media posts from Tyler and Vanessa. 2 weeks before the reunion, I decided to address the situation directly. I called Dad, determined to have a straightforward conversation about feeling excluded. Dad, I feel like I am being pushed out of the reunion planning even though it is at my house. Is there something going on that I should know about? Haley, sweetie, there have been some discussions about the arrangements. Diane thinks it might be best if you could come for just the Saturday activities rather than staying the whole weekend. I was being told I could not stay at my own property. I can sleep in my own bedroom, I said, my voice rising. The master bedroom is mine. Mom left the house to me, remember? The line went quiet for a moment, and then I heard the unmistakable sound of the phone being taken from Dad. Haley, I think it is time we had a frank conversation. This reunion is for family. Real family. Your constant attempts to insert yourself where you are not wanted are becoming tiresome. You are not coming to the lake house. You can meet everyone at the restaurant in town for dinner on Saturday if you must make an appearance. But the house is for those of us who are actually family. What are you talking about? It is my house. Mom left it to me. A house you never visit, never maintain, and clearly do not appreciate. Your father has been paying the taxes and upkeep for years. In everything but the most technical legal sense, It belongs to this family now. Your mother has been gone for nearly 20 years. It is time you moved on instead of clinging to the past. I could hear Dad in the background saying something about calming down, though I could not tell which of us he was addressing. By sacrificing me again, I was still the outsider, still being pushed aside to accommodate Diane and her vision of real family. And my father, the man who was supposed to protect me, was still standing by and letting it happen. I called my best friend, Jasmine, immediately after hanging up with Dad. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely dial her number. My own father is letting her kick me out of my own property. Jasmine came over with a bottle of wine and a listening ear. As I recounted the conversation in detail, her expression shifted from sympathy to outrage. "This is beyond ridiculous," she said, refilling our glasses. I had not, and this question planted a seed of worry. What if there had been some legal maneuvering I was unaware of? I made a mental note to contact my lawyer first thing in the morning. "What are you going to do?" Jasmine asked after we had talked for hours. There were comments from extended family members expressing excitement, posts from Tyler about fishing on our family dock, and pictures Vanessa had shared of previous visits labeled, "Returning to our summer home." Our dock. The language was deliberate and possessive. They had been steadily rewriting the narrative, erasing my ownership from the family story. "This is calculated," Jasmine said, scrolling through the posts. The next morning, I contacted my lawyer, Maria Santos, who had helped with some of my real estate investments. I forwarded her the social media posts and explained the situation. "First things first," she said after listening to my story, "I will pull the current deed and tax records to confirm your legal standing, but based on what you have told me, your ownership is clear. A verbal family arrangement about who pays the taxes does not change the deed. You have every right to control who enters your property," Maria assured me. "If you do not want them there, you can legally prevent them from entering." This confirmation should have been reassuring, but it only intensified my emotional turmoil. I spent the next few days in a fog, unable to concentrate on work, replaying the conversation with Diane and my father over and over. It was Jasmine who finally broke through my paralysis. Her words hit me hard because they were true. And where had it gotten me? Explicitly excluded from my own property, being told I was not real family. The question crystallized everything. It was my heritage, my connection to her, the physical manifestation of our bond. But I am not sure how. We spent the rest of the afternoon crafting a plan. I would take time off work and travel to the lake house ahead of the reunion. I would change the locks, making it clear that access to the property was on my terms. I also hired a security company to install cameras at the main entry points, not because I expected trouble, but because I wanted documentation of whatever happened next. This is about standing up for yourself after years of being pushed aside. If you do not draw this line, where will it end? Will they just continue taking pieces of you until there is nothing left? This was about more than property. Whatever happened next would change my family dynamics forever. The thought was both terrifying and strangely liberating. With each passing mile, memories flooded back. Mom and I singing along to the radio on similar journeys. Dad teaching me to identify different tree species as we drove. What would happen when my family arrived to find me there? The locks changed. Or would he once again choose the path of least resistance? The property looked much as it always had. A large rustic cabin-style home nestled among tall pines with a sprawling deck overlooking the clear blue lake. The flower beds my mother had so lovingly tended were overgrown with weeds. The exterior could use a fresh coat of stain. I unlocked the door with my key and stepped inside. I walked through the rooms taking inventory. Family photos that had once prominently featured my mother and me had been replaced with pictures of Dad, Diane, Tyler, and Vanessa. My childhood bedroom had been completely redecorated as a guest room, with no trace of my existence remaining. I called the locksmith, Thomas, who arrived within the hour. "Catherine was a lovely woman," he said as he worked on the front door lock. His casual mention of my mother brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Thank you for remembering her," I said quietly. It was about honoring my mother's wishes and protecting her legacy. By evening, the house was secure. In the master bedroom closet, I found a box of my mother's things that had somehow escaped Diane's purge. Old photo albums, handwritten recipes, a few pieces of jewelry too sentimental to be valuable. I sat on the floor surrounded by these treasures, feeling my mother's presence more strongly than I had in years. I know I am. The next morning, I continued with my preparations. If this confrontation was going to happen, I would face it in a house that reflected my standards, not Diane's neglect. It was as if he expected me to simply fade away, to accept my exclusion without protest. Let them face the consequences of their actions for once. I made coffee and sat on the deck, watching the sun rise over the lake, trying to center myself for what was to come. At precisely 11:45 the next morning, I heard the crunch of tires on the gravel driveway. They emerged from their vehicles laughing and talking, completely at ease as if arriving at their own home. He tried it once, then again with more force. His confusion was evident even from my vantage point. "The key is not working," he called to Diane. She marched over, hand extended. When her attempt also failed, I saw the first flicker of concern cross her face. She rattled the doorknob aggressively, then peered through the front window. I stepped back slightly, not ready to be seen just yet. "Gerald, call the property manager. This is unacceptable. I handle everything myself." "Then call a locksmith. We cannot stand out here all day. The kids are getting restless and we have food that needs refrigeration." Dad pulled out his phone, but then paused, a thought seemingly occurring to him. "Haley, thank goodness. We are at the lake house, but there seems to be a problem with the locks. Do you know anything about this?" "Yes, Dad. I changed the locks yesterday." There was a long pause. "You what? Why would you do that?" I could hear Diane in the background demanding to know what was happening. "Are you inside right now?" he finally asked. "Yes, I am." I moved to the window again, making myself visible. Diane followed his gaze, her face darkening when she saw me. By now, everyone was looking up at me in the window. Tyler seemed more confused than angry. Vanessa was whispering urgently to her husband. The children, oblivious to the tension, were already exploring the yard. "What are you doing?" Diane shouted up at me. "This property belongs to me," I called down, my voice steadier than I expected. My father looked utterly lost, caught between his wife's anger and his daughter's resolve. "I never said that," Diane protested, though her face had gone pale. "Gerald, she is making things up to cause trouble." "I have the call recorded," I said calmly, though this was a bluff, every word. She turned to my father, placing a hand on his arm, her voice suddenly saccharine. One moment she was furious, the next she was the picture of family harmony, but I was done with her manipulations. "You showed me who you really are, and more importantly, you showed Dad. For 20 years you have been pushing me out, erasing my mother's memory and treating me like an inconvenient reminder of Dad's past. And for 20 years Dad has let you do it." I looked directly at my father, whose face had crumpled with something like recognition. Perhaps he was finally seeing the truth he had been avoiding for so long. "But you let them become this way," I replied. "You cannot just lock us out. We drove for hours to get here. We have children who need to use the bathroom. And plenty of hotels in town with vacancies." I checked. "We have been coming here for years." "No, Tyler. This is my lake house, which I have generously allowed you to use. But that generosity ends when I am told I am not welcome in my own home." Diane was growing more agitated by the second. "Gerald, call the police. She cannot do this. We have rights." "Actually, she can," came a voice from the driveway. Thomas the locksmith had arrived, carrying a toolbox. I could not help overhearing. "This property is deeded solely to Haley Matthews. I verified it myself yesterday before changing the locks. She has every legal right to determine who enters." Diane rounded on him. "And who are you?" "This is none of your business." "Thomas Wilson, ma'am. I have been the locksmith in these parts for 40 years. Knew Catherine Matthews well. Helped install the original locks on this place back in the 80s. He nodded toward me in the window. Her mother would be proud to see her standing up for herself. Thomas's unexpected support left Diane momentarily speechless. Several neighbors had now emerged from their properties, drawn by the commotion. This very public embarrassment seemed to be the final straw for her. "This is absolutely outrageous," she hissed, turning back to Dad. I will not stand here being humiliated. We are leaving. Diane, wait, Dad said, reaching for her arm. We need to resolve this. She jerked away from him. There is nothing to resolve. Your daughter has made her choice. Now you make yours. Are you coming with your family? Or are you staying with her? The ultimatum hung in the air. I held my breath, not daring to hope that for once, just once, my father would choose me. He looked up at me, then back at Diane, conflict written across his face. Let me talk to Haley alone, he said finally. We need to work this out. There is nothing to work out. Diane was nearly shouting now. Either she opens the door and apologizes or we leave. Those are the options. No, Diane, Dad said, his voice finding a firmness I had not heard in years. Those are your options. Mine are more complicated. For a moment, Diane seemed stunned by his resistance. Then her expression hardened. Fine. You deal with your spoiled, entitled daughter. The rest of us will find somewhere civilized to stay. She turned to Tyler and Vanessa. Kids, pack everything back in the cars. We are going to find a hotel. Tyler hesitated, looking between his mother and my father. Vanessa immediately began herding her children back toward the minivan, her husband following with resigned efficiency. I will call you when I have figured things out, Dad said to Diane. She did not respond, just stalked back to their SUV and got in, slamming the door with enough force to shake the vehicle. As the caravan of cars pulled away, with only my father remaining in the driveway, I felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that I had stood my ground, sadness for the family fracture, and uncertainty about what would come next. From my window I called down to Dad. There is a coffee shop in town called Lakeside Brew. Meet me there in an hour. We need to talk. He nodded, his shoulders slumped with the weight of 20 years of choices finally catching up to him. As he got into his car and drove away, I leaned against the window frame, exhausted but strangely at peace. For the first time since my mother died, I had honored her memory by valuing myself the way she would have wanted. The Lakeside Brew was quiet for a Saturday afternoon. I chose a table in the back corner, ordered a latte and waited. Dad arrived precisely on time, looking older and more tired than I had ever seen him. He ordered a black coffee and sat across from me, his hands fidgeting with a napkin. I do not even know where to begin, he said after a long silence. How about with an apology? I suggested quietly. He nodded, meeting my eyes directly. I am sorry, Haley. Not just for what happened with the reunion, but for 20 years of failing to protect you, for letting Diane push you to the margins of our family, for not seeing what was happening right in front of me. The simplicity and directness of his apology caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness, excuses, attempts to minimize the situation, but he seemed to have crossed some internal threshold, finally seeing the truth that had been there all along. Why did you let it happen? I asked, the question that had haunted me for years finally spoken aloud. Dad sighed heavily. After your mother died, I was lost, completely adrift. I could barely function, barely take care of myself, let alone a grieving teenager. When I met Diane, she was organized, competent, decisive, all the things I was not. She made decisions when I could not. She kept our household running when I could barely get out of bed. He took a sip of his coffee, gathering his thoughts. I convinced myself that her strength was what we both needed, that her taking control was a good thing. And by the time I realized how much she had isolated you, how she had turned you into an outsider in your own home, it felt too late to fix it. It was never too late, Dad. I know that now. But I was a coward. I told myself I was keeping the peace, being diplomatic. In reality, I was choosing the path of least resistance. It was easier to let Diane have her way than to confront the problems in our blended family. His honesty was both healing and painful. For so long I had wondered if I was imagining the dynamics, if I was the problem. Having him acknowledge the truth validated decades of hurt. When Diane suggested using the lake house for the reunion, I thought it was a good idea, he continued. A chance for everyone to enjoy the property together. I had no idea she planned to exclude you. When she told you not to come, I was shocked, but I still did not stand up to her. That is my greatest failure in all of this. Why does she hate me so much, Dad? What did I ever do to her? Dad shook his head sadly. It is not about you, Haley. It never was. Diane has always been threatened by your mother's memory, by the life I had before her. The lake house is a physical reminder of that previous life, of Catherine. When your mother left it specifically to you, I think Diane took it as a posthumous slight. That is ridiculous. Mom made her will before Dad even met Diane. I know, but Diane has spent years convincing herself, and trying to convince me, that the lake house should be considered family property, not just yours. She has been laying groundwork, talking about our lake house to everyone who would listen. I suspect she hoped that eventually you would lose interest in it, and it would default to becoming a general family asset. The calculation behind this strategy stunned me. While I had been focusing on my career, occasionally visiting the property I loved but took somewhat for granted, Diane had been orchestrating a slow-motion appropriation. Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need an honest answer. Have you ever signed any documents regarding the lake house that Diane prepared? Anything transferring partial ownership or rights? He looked alarmed. No, absolutely not. I would never do that. The house was Catherine's gift to you. I have always respected that. Relief washed over me. At least there had been no legal manipulation to match the emotional one. Our conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Tyler, who spotted us through the coffee shop window and came in alone. Can I join you? He asked hesitantly. I nodded and he pulled up a chair. Mom took Vanessa and the kids to that resort on the other side of the lake, he explained. I told her I needed some time to think. Tyler looked uncomfortable. About what I asked? About everything that happened today, about what you said. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I have been thinking about how things have been since we became a family. I was just a kid when it all started, but looking back, I can see that you got pushed out. His admission surprised me. Tyler and I had never been close, had never really discussed our family dynamics. Mom has always had this thing about being in control. He continued, about defining who belongs and who does not. I benefited from it, so I never questioned it. But today, seeing how far she was willing to go, claiming your property and excluding you from it, it made me question a lot of things. Like what? Dad asked. Like all the stories she has told us over the years, about how Haley was difficult and ungrateful, about how she resented us and wanted nothing to do with the family, about how she abandoned you, Dad, after college. Each accusation felt like a fresh wound. None of that is true, I said quietly. I am starting to see that, Tyler replied. Mom has been creating her own narrative for years, and we all just accepted it. But today, when she was so blatantly trying to take your house, something clicked for me. If she could lie about that, what else has she lied about? Dad looked stricken. I had no idea she was saying those things about Haley. She was careful to never say them around you, Tyler explained. It was always when you were not there. Little comments, suggestions, building this image of Haley as the villain in our family story. The revelation of this systematic campaign against me was overwhelming. All these years I had been fighting a battle I did not even know was happening. I am sorry I believed her, Tyler said, looking directly at me. And I am sorry I participated in trying to use your lake house without your permission. It was wrong. His apology was unexpected and deeply appreciated. Thank you for saying that. We talked for another hour, the three of us beginning the painful process of unraveling 2 decades of misunderstandings and manipulations. By the end, we had reached a tentative compromise. I think you should stay at the lake house, I told Dad and Tyler. There is plenty of room, and it would give us time to talk more to start rebuilding. Diane and Vanessa can stay at the resort if that is what they prefer. Are you sure? Dad asked. After everything that has happened? I am sure that I want to try to heal our relationship, I said. And I think having some time together, just the three of us, might be a good start. Tyler looked relieved. I will get my stuff from the resort, but do not expect Vanessa to join us. She always sides with Mom. That is her choice, I said. The invitation is open if she changes her mind. As we prepared to leave the coffee shop, Dad touched my arm. There is something else you should know. When we were planning this trip, Diane mentioned talking to a lawyer about adverse possession laws. What are those? Tyler asked. It is a legal concept where someone can potentially claim ownership of property if they have been openly using and maintaining it for a certain period of time. I explained, my real estate background kicking in. But it would never work with the lake house. I visit regularly, pay the utilities, and have clear legal title. I think she was hoping to establish some kind of claim, Dad admitted. She kept talking about how she had been the one organizing family trips there for years, how she had been adding improvements to the property. Like what improvements? I asked skeptically. She had the kitchen faucet replaced last year, and she bought new curtains for the living room. I could not help but laugh at the absurdity. A faucet and curtains do not constitute a legal claim to real estate. I know that now, Dad said sheepishly, but it shows how determined she was to consider the lake house as family property rather than yours. This final piece of information confirmed what I had suspected. Diane's exclusion of me from the reunion was not a simple family slight. It was part of a longer-term strategy to sever my connection to the property. The realization was chilling but also clarifying. I had not overreacted by changing the locks and asserting my ownership. I had protected what was rightfully mine. The rest of that summer marked a beautiful turning point. Dad and Tyler stayed at the lake house with me for that first week. We didn't just talk, we reconnected. We fished off the dock like I used to with Mom, Dad sharing stories about her I'd never heard. Tyler and I found a surprising friendship, staying up late playing old board games and laughing until our sides hurt. It was a healing I didn't know was possible. A few days later, to my surprise, Vanessa called. She apologized, explaining that her mother's influence had clouded her judgment for too long. The next weekend, she and her kids joined us. Watching her children splash in the same water I did as a girl, their laughter echoing across the lake, felt like coming full circle. The house was finally filled with the joy it was meant to hold. My father and Diane are now in counseling. It's a long road, but for the first time, my dad is actively working to create a family where everyone is respected. He even helped me hang a beautiful new portrait of my mother in the main living room, right where it belongs. The lake house is no longer a battleground. It's my sanctuary again. But now it's also a place of new beginnings, a testament to the fact that it's never too late to stand up, speak your truth, and rebuild family on a foundation of respect and love. Life is not about accumulating properties or possessions, but about establishing our place in the world, about creating spaces where we can be fully ourselves. Sometimes that requires difficult confrontations and painful revelations. Sometimes it means changing locks, both literal and metaphorical, to protect what is precious to us. If my story resonates with you, if you have ever had to fight for your place in your family or defend what is rightfully yours, please share your experience in the comments. I would love to hear how you handled similar situations. And if you found value in my journey, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of standing up for yourself with dignity and strength. Thank you for listening, and remember, setting boundaries is not selfish. It is an act of self-respect and ultimately self-love.